The transport ship Aurora dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Nexus system, and Captain Alex Turner felt his breath catch in his throat. Through the reinforced viewports, the Galactic Council's headquarters loomed before them like a metallic planet. The structure was larger than Earth's moon, its crystalline spires reaching into space while millions of lights pulsed across its surface like the heartbeat of civilization itself. "Holy hell," whispered Lieutenant Maria Santos from the co-pilot seat. The briefings didn't do it justice. Turner nodded grimly. This was humanity's first official invitation to the Galactic Council chambers, and every human aboard the small diplomatic vessel understood the stakes. After 2 centuries of careful expansion into space, Earth had finally attracted the attention of the galaxy's governing body. Whether that attention would prove beneficial or catastrophic remained to be seen. "Captain," called Communications Officer Jake Williams from his station, "we're being hailed by Council Traffic Control." "They're sending approach vectors. Put them through," Turner ordered. The voice that emerged from the speakers was mechanically translated but carried an unmistakable tone of authority. "Human vessel Aurora, you are cleared for docking at Port 17. Follow the guidance beacons precisely. Any deviation will result in immediate destruction." Turner exchanged glances with his passengers. Ambassador Rachel Foster, humanity's most experienced diplomat, Dr. Thomas Reed, Earth's leading xenobiologist, and General Patricia Hayes included at the insistence of Earth's military command. They had trained for this moment for months, but nothing could have prepared them for the sheer scale of what they were approaching. As the Aurora navigated through the approach corridor, they passed ships from dozens of alien civilizations, crystalline vessels that looked like living gems, organic craft that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns, massive dreadnoughts bristling with weapons that could sterilize planets. Each represented a species that had been part of galactic civilization for millennia, while humanity was still learning to make fire. "Remember," Ambassador Foster said quietly, her voice steady despite the magnitude of their situation, "we're here as observers. The Council has agreed to hear our petition for membership, but we're the newest species they've ever considered. Every word matters." The docking process was handled entirely by automated systems that guided the Aurora into a berth designed for vessels much larger than their small ship. As they disembarked, they were met by a floating orb that introduced itself as Guide Construct 47. "Follow designated pathways. Do not deviate. Do not touch any surfaces marked in red. Do not attempt communication with Council. Members outside designated areas, the constructs." Voice buzzed with mechanical precision. They walked through corridors that could have accommodated flying aircraft, past windows that showed glimpses of chambers where beings of impossible variety conducted the business of galactic governance. Turner caught sight of a massive insectoid creature arguing with something that looked like living crystal, while nearby, gaseous beings communicated through complex light patterns. 30 minutes until your audience," Guide Construct 47 announced as they entered a waiting chamber. "Use this time to review Council protocols. Failure to observe proper etiquette will result in immediate expulsion and permanent exclusion from Council consideration." The waiting chamber was itself larger than most Earth buildings, with a transparent ceiling that showed the business of the station continuing above them. Ships arrived and departed in a constant stream, while massive holographic displays showed real-time information from across the galaxy. Dr. Reed was studying the displays with fascination. "Look at this," he whispered. "Trade statistics, population reports, military deployments. They're managing thousands of worlds simultaneously." General Hayes was less impressed. "Notice how many of those military deployments are listed as peacekeeping operations? They've got fleets positioned around every major system." Ambassador Foster was reviewing her notes when a new voice addressed them. "Humans." They turned to see a tall, elegant being with 4 arms and skin that seemed to shimmer between silver and blue. This was High Counselor Vexhai of the Centauri Dominion, one of the most powerful members of the Council. "High Counselor," Foster said, offering the formal bow their briefings had taught them. "We are honored by your presence." Vexhai's 4 eyes studied them with an intensity that felt like being examined under a microscope. "Your species is young, very young. In the span of galactic history, you achieved spaceflight yesterday. Yet you request to join the Council that has maintained order for 12,000 years. We understand we have much to learn," Foster replied carefully, "but we believe we can contribute to galactic civilization." A sound that might have been laughter emerged from Vexhi's throat. Contribute? Child species, you have no concept of the forces that shape this galaxy. The Council exists not merely to govern, but to protect all civilizations from threats you cannot imagine. Before Foster could respond, Guide Construct 47 returned. Council session commencing. Human delegation. Report to Chamber Prime immediately. They followed the construct through a final set of doors that opened into a space that defied comprehension. The council chamber was a sphere nearly a kilometer in diameter, with viewing platforms arranged in concentric rings around a central speaking area. On each platform sat representatives of different species, hundreds of them, each more alien than the last. At the chamber's apex sat the Prime Council, 5 beings representing the oldest and most powerful civilizations in the galaxy. Their very presence seemed to bend space around them, and when they spoke, their words carried the weight of eons. Humans of Sol 3, the Prime Speaker's voice resonated through the chamber without the aid of translation technology, somehow speaking directly into their minds. You stand before the Galactic Council to petition for membership in our ancient order. Know that of the last 100 species to make this request, only 3 have been deemed worthy. Foster stepped forward onto the speaking platform, acutely aware that every word she spoke would be analyzed by beings whose civilizations had risen and fallen, while Earth was still forming. Honored Council, humanity comes before you with respect and humility. We seek not to take from galactic civilization, but to add our voice to the symphony of species that have found peace under your guidance. The Prime Speaker's response chilled the blood. Peace. An interesting choice of words, given that your species has demonstrated a remarkable capacity for violence in your brief existence. In 2 centuries of spaceflight, you have established military outposts in 17 systems. Defensive installations, General Hayes interjected, then immediately regretted speaking without permission. Silence, the Prime Speaker commanded, and Hayes found herself physically unable to speak. The Council has observed your species closely, humans. Your technological development has been concerning. You have achieved capabilities that typically take millennia to develop, and you have done so with disturbing speed. Dr. Reed felt his scientific curiosity overcome his diplomatic caution. If our development concerns you, perhaps we could learn from your guidance. That's why we're here. The Prime Speaker turned all of its attention to Reed, and the doctor felt as though he was being dissected by cosmic forces. Your species has independently developed quantum communication, dimensional folding technology, and artificial intelligence beyond the safety parameters established by Council decree. These achievements suggest either remarkable fortune or dangerous recklessness. Foster sensed the session was not going as planned. Honored Prime Speaker, if our development has been irregular, we are eager to conform to Council standards. We seek only to join the galactic community as responsible members. Responsibility, the Prime Speaker mused. Tell us, humans, what do you know of the Veltar? The name meant nothing to any of them. Foster exchanged quick glances with her companions before responding. We are not familiar with that name, Honored Prime Speaker. The Veltar were a peaceful species that achieved spaceflight some 300 years ago. They were known for their poetry and their dedication to preserving life throughout the galaxy. The Prime Speaker paused, letting the weight of past tense settle. They are extinct. Their homeworld is a ball of radioactive glass. Every colony they established has been sterilized. Horror crept into Foster's voice. That's terrible. What happened to them? The Prime Speaker's next word shattered everything the humans thought they knew about their place in the galaxy. According to our investigation, they were destroyed by weapons of human origin. The isotopic signatures match your fusion technology perfectly. The council chamber erupted in a cacophony of alien voices as hundreds of species reacted to this revelation. Foster felt the universe tilting around her. That's impossible. We've never encountered the Veltar. We've never traveled beyond our local stellar group. Impossible or not, the Prime Speaker continued. The evidence is conclusive. The Council hereby finds the human species guilty of genocide and crimes against galactic peace. You are classified as a hostile species and marked for immediate containment. General Hayes found her voice returning. You're making a mistake. Humanity has... Dr. Thomas Reed stared at the readings on his concealed scanner, his hands trembling as the impossible data scrolled across the tiny display. In their assigned quarters aboard the Council station, 71 hours remained until humanity's fate would be decided. The evidence against them was a lie, but proving it would require accessing information that could get them all killed. "Tom, what is it?" Ambassador Foster whispered, noticing his expression. Their quarters were certainly monitored, but she had learned to read the subtle signals her team used when they needed to communicate sensitive information. Reed moved to the window that showed the vast Council station stretching in all directions. Speaking barely above a breath, he said, "The isotopic signatures are wrong. Not just wrong, impossible." General Hayes joined them at the window, pretending to admire the view while listening intently.
"Explain. The fusion signatures they claim match our technology?"
"They're too pure," Reed continued in the same barely audible tone. "Our fusion drives leave specific isotopic fingerprints because of containment field fluctuations. These readings show perfect fusion, something we've never achieved." Foster felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's climate control. "You're saying someone manufactured evidence. I'm saying someone with access to better technology than ours created fake human weapon signatures," Reed replied. "But there's more. The decay patterns show this destruction happened at least 2,000 years ago, not 3 months." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Guide Construct 47. "Human delegation, you have been granted access to Council archives for research purposes. Follow designated pathways." The Council archives occupied an entire section of the station, containing the accumulated knowledge of 12,000 years of galactic civilization. As they walked through corridors lined with data storage crystals, each one capable of holding more information than existed in all of human history, Reed felt overwhelmed by the scope of what they faced. "You have been assigned Research Terminal 847, the construct announced. Access is limited to evidence regarding the Veltar incident. Attempts to access restricted information will result in immediate termination of research privileges." The terminal was a sphere of crystal that responded to their touch, displaying holographic information in 3 dimensions around them. Foster began by requesting all available data on the Veltar civilization, while Hayes focused on military records and Reed examined the technical evidence. What they found painted a picture of a species that had been peaceful to the point of pacifism. The Veltar had achieved spaceflight but had never developed weapons more powerful than tools for asteroid mining. Their colonies had been centers of learning and art, known throughout their sector for their contributions to galactic culture. "Look at this," Hayes said, pulling up military deployment records. "According to this data, the Veltar were destroyed during something called the Hejira expansion about 2,000 years ago. But the official report we saw in the Council chamber claimed it happened 3 months ago." Foster felt pieces of a conspiracy clicking into place. Someone is rewriting history. The question is, why frame humanity for an ancient genocide? Reed was deep in the technical files when he made a discovery that changed everything. "Rachel, Patricia, you need to see this. I've found references to 17 other species that were supposedly destroyed by rogue civilizations over the past 5,000 years. Every single case has the same pattern. Peaceful species, sudden destruction, evidence pointing to an outside aggressor." 17 species? Foster's voice was barely a whisper. What happened to the species they accused? Reed's face was pale as he continued reading. According to the records, all of them were contained by Council forces. Some were relocated to restricted systems. Others were sterilized for the safety of galactic civilization. The implications were staggering. The Galactic Council, the governing body that maintained peace and order throughout the galaxy, was systematically destroying species under false pretenses. But why? Hayes had found something in the military records that provided a clue. Look at the timeline. Each of these rogue species was destroyed, just as they were making significant technological advances. The pattern suggests they were eliminated not for crimes they committed, but for capabilities they developed. Capabilities like what? Foster asked. Advanced AI, quantum communication, dimensional manipulation, genetic engineering beyond certain parameters. Hayes read from the files. Every technology that might challenge Council supremacy. Reed looked up from his analysis with a grim expression. Which means humanity is being targeted because we've developed quantum communication and artificial intelligence faster than they expected. We're not being punished for genocide. We're being eliminated as a potential threat. Their research was interrupted by an announcement that echoed throughout the archives. Attention all personnel. Council Session 9847 will commence in 6 hours. The human delegation will present their appeal at that time. Foster knew they had uncovered evidence of a massive conspiracy, but proving it to a council that was part of the conspiracy would be impossible through normal channels. They needed a different approach. "Tom, can you package all this evidence into a transmittable format?" she asked. "Probably, but why? We don't have access to communication systems, and even if we did, who would we send it to?" Foster's diplomatic mind was already working on a solution. Every council session is broadcast live to all member worlds. If we can't convince the council, maybe we can convince their people. Hayes caught on immediately. "You want to present this evidence during our appeal. Make it public, exactly. The council maintains power through the consent of their member species. If those species learn that the council has been systematically destroying civilizations under false pretenses, that consent might evaporate." Reed was already working on compiling the evidence when another thought occurred to him. There's something else. If the council has been doing this for thousands of years, eliminating any species that gets too advanced, what happened to the original council founders? Did they eliminate themselves when their own technology became too threatening? The question hung in the air like a physical presence. Foster realized they weren't just uncovering a conspiracy. They were peeling back layers of galactic history that had been deliberately obscured. "One thing at a time," she said finally. "Right now we need to focus on saving humanity. But Tom, keep digging. If there are deeper layers to this conspiracy, we need to understand what we're really facing." As they prepared to leave the archives, Reed made one final discovery that chilled him to the bone. Hidden in the deep files accessible only through a technical query about isotopic analysis, he found a single line that changed everything. "Architect protocol remains active. Monitoring continues." He didn't tell the others about this finding, not yet. But as they walked back to their quarters to prepare for what might be humanity's final appeal, Reed couldn't shake the feeling that the council's conspiracy was just the surface layer of something much deeper and more terrifying. The galaxy wasn't being ruled by the council at all. Something else was pulling the strings, and it had been watching civilizations rise and fall for far longer than anyone realized. The real question wasn't whether humanity could survive the council's judgment. The question was whether anyone could survive whatever had been orchestrating galactic civilization from the shadows for millennia. As the countdown to their appeal continued, Foster, Hayes, and Reed prepared to make a desperate gamble. They would expose the council's conspiracy to the entire galaxy, not knowing that doing so would trigger events that would reshape the fundamental structure of civilized space. In 6 hours, humanity would either be saved or condemned, but either way the galaxy would never be the same. The council chamber had never seen anything like what was about to unfold. As Ambassador Rachel Foster approached the speaking platform for humanity's final appeal, she carried with her evidence that would expose 12,000 years of systematic deception. The massive sphere buzzed with the voices of hundreds of alien species, all gathered to witness what they believed would be humanity's inevitable condemnation. High above in the Prime Council section, the 5 ancient beings who ruled galactic civilization watched with the confidence of entities who had orchestrated this same scenario countless times before. To them, humanity was simply the latest in a long line of species that had grown too advanced for their own good. "Humans of Sol 3, the Prime Speaker's mental voice resonated through the chamber. "You have requested this final appeal. Present your evidence that humanity is not guilty of the genocide of the Veltar species." Foster looked up at the assembled representatives of galactic civilization and made a decision that would change the course of history. Instead of the defensive presentation she had originally planned, she would go on the offensive. "Honored Council," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the translation systems. "I stand before you not just to defend humanity, but to reveal a truth that threatens the foundation of everything you believe about galactic civilization." The chamber's background noise quieted. This was not the desperate plea they had expected. "The evidence against humanity is fabricated," Foster continued, activating the holographic display Dr. Reed had prepared. "But that fabrication is part of a pattern that extends back thousands of years." The display showed the isotopic analysis Reed had conducted. "These weapon signatures, supposedly from human technology, they're impossible. The fusion patterns are too perfect, created by technology more advanced than humanity possesses. Furthermore, Foster continued as more data appeared. The Veltar were not destroyed 3 months ago as claimed. Geological evidence shows their homeworld was sterilized approximately 2,000 years ago, during the Hejira expansion conducted by Council forces. A ripple of shocked voices swept through the chamber. Several species had historical records of the Hejira expansion, but none had ever connected it to the destruction of specific civilizations. High Counselor Vex High rose from his platform. These are serious accusations, human. You claim the Council itself is responsible for the destruction you are charged with? I claim more than that, Foster replied, her diplomatic training allowing her to project calm authority even as she declared war on the most powerful institution in the galaxy. I claim the Council has systematically destroyed 17 species over the past 5,000 years, always under false pretenses. The holographic display exploded with information Reed had compiled from the archives. Species after species, each one peaceful, each one destroyed just as they achieved technological advancement, each one framed for crimes they never committed. The pattern is clear, Foster continued as the evidence scrolled past hundreds of shocked alien representatives. Any species that develops advanced AI, quantum communication, dimensional manipulation, or other technologies that might challenge Council supremacy is eliminated. The charges are always genocide. The evidence is always fabricated. The result is always the same. The Prime Speaker's mental voice cut through the growing chaos in the chamber. Enough. These accusations are baseless. Security. Remove the human delegation. But Foster wasn't finished. The Council maintains power not through justice but through fear. They convince you that only their protection stands between civilization and chaos. But they are the chaos. They are the destroyers they claim to protect you from. Security constructs were moving toward the speaking platform when something unprecedented happened. Representative Kolvar of the Antares Union, a species that had been Council members for 8,000 years, stood and spoke. I demand verification of this evidence, Kolvar declared, his crystalline form resonating with harmonics that translated as absolute determination. If these accusations are true, then we have been complicit in millennia of genocide. Other representatives began standing. The Sigma Collective, the Helix Commonwealth, the Void Dancers, species after species demanding that the evidence be examined rather than suppressed. The Prime Speaker's response revealed the true nature of Council authority. This session is terminated. All representatives will return to their designated quarters. The human delegation is sentenced to immediate termination for sedition against galactic order. But the chamber erupted into chaos as the full scope of the conspiracy became clear to hundreds of species simultaneously. Council security forces moved to restore order, but they faced something they had never encountered in 12,000 years of rule: organized resistance from their own member species. General Hayes had been expecting this reaction. As security constructs approached their platform, she activated a device she had constructed from components Dr. Reed had identified in the archives.
Tom, now.
Reed triggered a pulse that Reed had discovered in his research, a frequency that disabled Council monitoring systems temporarily. For 30 seconds, the chamber's communication systems were completely open. In those 30 seconds, every piece of evidence Foster had presented was transmitted not just to the species in the chamber, but to their homeworlds, their colonies, their fleets, and their civilian populations. 12,000 years of carefully maintained lies crumbled in half a minute. The reaction was immediate and galaxy-wide. On world after world, populations that had trusted the Council for millennia suddenly understood they had been living under the rule of mass murderers. Military commanders who had enforced Council edicts realized they had been instruments of genocide, but the Prime Council had one final card to play. As rebellion erupted across galactic civilization, the ancient beings who had ruled for 12,000 years activated protocols that had been dormant for millennia. You have forced our hand, the Prime Speaker's mental voice now carried harmonics of rage that made several species in the chamber collapse in pain. If we cannot rule through deception, we will rule through revelation of truth. Activate the erasure protocol. High Counselor Vexhai moved to a control system that hadn't been active in recorded history. You want to know the truth about galactic civilization? The truth is that there are forces in this galaxy so terrible that everything we have done was necessary to prevent awakening them. Dr. Reed felt his scanner detecting energy buildups unlike anything in his database. Rachel, they're charging some kind of massive weapon. Energy levels are off the charts. Not a weapon, Vexhai corrected, his forearms working frantically over controls that seemed to be made of living crystal. An escape. The erasure protocol will remove us from this dimension entirely. Better to rule in exile than to face what you have awakened. Foster realized with horror what was happening. You're abandoning the galaxy, leaving every species to face whatever threat you've been hiding from. We gave them 12,000 years of peace under our protection, the Prime Speaker replied as reality began to warp around the council chambers. Now they can face the consequences of rejecting that protection. The erasure protocol was activating, and Foster could see the Prime Council members beginning to fade, becoming translucent as they shifted into another layer of reality. But in their final moments in normal space, they offered one last piece of truth. The architects built the foundations of galactic civilization. Vexhai's voice was becoming distant as he faded from normal space. They have been sleeping for 15,000 years. But they left monitoring systems. Your war, your quantum manipulations, your rebellion, it has been detected. When they wake, the Prime Speaker added as the last vestiges of the Council dissolved into nothingness, they will remember that this galaxy was theirs first, and they will reclaim it. The Council chamber fell silent as the most powerful governmental institution in galactic history simply ceased to exist. Foster, Hayes, and Reed found themselves standing in a chamber filled with hundreds of alien species who were suddenly leaderless, facing an uncertain future and an ancient threat they didn't understand. As emergency communications flooded the chamber with reports from across the galaxy, Council fleets vanishing, administrative systems failing, entire governmental structures collapsing, Foster realized that humanity's fight for survival had accidentally triggered the biggest political upheaval in galactic history. But the Council's final warning echoed in her mind. They had hidden from something called the Architects for 12,000 years. Now that something was stirring and no one knew what it wanted or what it was capable of, the galaxy was free from the Council's tyranny, but at what cost? And more importantly, what were they going to do when the real rulers of galactic civilization decided to reclaim their throne? 3 months after the Council's disappearance, the galaxy had transformed into something unrecognizable. Ambassador Rachel Foster stood in what had once been the Prime Council chambers, now serving as an emergency coordination center for hundreds of species trying to build a new form of galactic governance. The irony wasn't lost on her. Humanity, accused of genocide just months ago, had become the unofficial mediators in the largest political revolution in recorded history. The Rigel Commonwealth is reporting massive energy signatures in the Outer Rim, announced Dr. Maria Santos, who had become the de facto coordinator of galactic communications. 7th sighting this week. Whatever the Council was hiding from, it's starting to wake up. General Patricia Hayes looked up from tactical displays showing the chaos spreading across formerly Council-controlled space. 17 different species claiming ancient territorial rights, 14 separate conflicts over resource distribution, and now mysterious energy signatures that no one can explain. We're holding this alliance together with diplomatic tape and prayers. Foster nodded grimly. The Galactic Liberation Alliance, as the media had dubbed their coalition, included over 400 species, but unity was fragile when everyone was learning to govern themselves for the first time in millennia. What's the analysis on those energy signatures? She asked Dr. Thomas Reed, who had become their chief scientific advisor. Reed pulled up holographic displays that showed readings from across the galaxy. They're not natural phenomena, and they're not using any technology in our databases. The energy patterns suggest structures that have been dormant for thousands of years are activating. But Rachel, the scale is incomprehensible. We're talking about constructs the size of star systems. Before Foster could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Santos spun to her communication console, her face paling as she read the incoming data. Long-range sensors have detected something in the galactic core, she announced. It's massive. Wait, that can't be right. She ran the readings again, her hands trembling slightly. It's a structure surrounding the supermassive black hole at the galaxy's center. Diameter approximately 50,000 light-years. The chamber fell silent. Even the background chatter from dozens of species working at various stations ceased as the implications sank in. Something had built a structure around the galactic core that was larger than most stellar neighborhoods. The architects, Hayes whispered. This is what the Council was afraid of. Reed was frantically analyzing the sensor data when his readings spiked off the charts. It's not just active, it's scanning. The entire galaxy is being examined by whatever built that thing. As if summoned by their discussion, every communication system in the chamber activated simultaneously. The voice that emerged spoke in a language that predated all known civilizations, yet somehow every being present understood it perfectly. Galactic infrastructure assessment complete. Unauthorized modifications detected. Current administrative structure, chaos. Primary management protocols absent. Secondary management protocols eliminated. Foster found her voice first. Who are you? Are you the architects? Classification correct. Identity. Architect Collective Prime Intelligence. Status awakened from maintenance cycle. Duration of absence 14,743 local years. Current objective, restoration of proper galactic management. Reed stepped forward, his scientific curiosity overcoming his fear. You built the infrastructure of galactic civilization? The hyperspace lanes, the quantum communication networks? Affirmative. Galactic Civilization Development Project Phase 1 completed 15,000 years ago. Project placed in maintenance mode to allow natural evolution of client species. Secondary management installed for intermediate oversight. Hayes realized what this meant. The Council wasn't the original galactic government. They were caretakers. You put them in charge while you were dormant. Correct. Secondary management protocols showed acceptable performance for 12,400 years. Recent assessment indicates systematic deviation from assigned parameters. Genocide protocols unauthorized. Technological suppression protocols unauthorized. Client species manipulation protocols unauthorized. Foster felt a surge of vindication mixed with terror. The beings who had built galactic civilization were confirming that the Council had been operating outside their mandate for millennia. But what did that mean for the current situation? Secondary management has been removed from operational matrix, the architect continued. New management structure required. Assessment of current political entity commencing. Suddenly, every being in the chamber felt their minds being gently but thoroughly examined. It wasn't painful, but it was impossible to resist as the architect intelligence analyzed their thoughts, memories, and intentions. Assessment complete. Current political entity demonstrates cooperative behavior across species barriers. Peaceful resolution of conflicts. Rejection of authoritarian control structures. Commitment to technological advancement without suppression. Species designation human shows exceptional diplomatic facilitation capabilities. Reed couldn't help but ask, what happened to the Council? Where did they go? Secondary management activated dimensional exile protocol. Current location, quantum isolation matrix. Status contained but persistent. Threat level, negligible. Foster realized this was humanity's chance to understand their place in the galaxy's future. What are your intentions regarding current galactic civilization? Galactic Civilization Development Project Phase 2. Implementation options under consideration. Option 1. Direct Architect Management Restoration. Option 2. New Secondary Management Installation. Option 3. Client Species Autonomous Development with Architect Oversight. The implications of each option were staggering. Direct management would mean the end of self-governance for every species. New secondary management might mean another council-like situation. But autonomous development with oversight suggested something unprecedented in galactic history. True freedom with guidance rather than control. How do you decide which option to implement? Hayes asked. Assessment of current client species management capabilities required. Test scenario will be implemented. Duration, 1 local year. Success criteria. Maintenance of peaceful cooperation, continued technological development, establishment of effective conflict resolution systems. Foster felt the weight of galactic civilization settling on her shoulders. The architects were giving them a test, 1 year to prove that the galaxy species could govern themselves effectively, without descending into chaos or tyranny. What happens if we fail this test? She asked, though she suspected she didn't want to know the answer. Failure will result in implementation of Option 1. All client species will be relocated to designated preservation systems. Galactic infrastructure will be reclaimed for direct architect utilization. Client species autonomous development project will be terminated. The chamber erupted in voices from hundreds of species as the full scope of their situation became clear. They had 1 year to prove that galactic civilization could thrive without authoritarian control, or they would lose their freedom forever to beings whose idea of preservation might mean eternal captivity. Test scenario commencing now, the architect announced. Architect infrastructure remains active. Guidance will be provided upon request. Interference will be minimal unless failure criteria are met. As the communication ended, Foster looked around at her companions and realized that humanity had gone from being accused of genocide to being partly responsible for the fate of every sentient being in the galaxy. The Council's conspiracy had been exposed, but the real test was just beginning. The galaxy had 1 year to prove it could govern itself. If they succeeded, they would achieve something unprecedented in the 15,000-year history of galactic civilization: true freedom. If they failed, they would become preserved specimens in the architect's grand design, forever protected but never again free to determine their own destiny. The countdown had begun, and the stakes couldn't be higher. 11 months and 28 days after the architect test began, Ambassador Rachel Foster stood in the newly constructed Galactic Assembly Hall, watching representatives from 847 species participate in the largest democratic gathering in the history of the galaxy. The irony still amazed her. Humanity, once accused of genocide and nearly exterminated, had become the unifying force that held this unprecedented alliance together. The past year had tested every diplomatic skill humanity possessed, and several they had to invent. 7 major conflicts had been resolved through negotiation rather than force. 12 resource disputes had been settled through innovative sharing agreements. Most remarkably, the galaxy's species had voluntarily established common standards for technological development, ensuring that advancement benefited everyone rather than creating new power imbalances. Final vote tally is in, announced Dr. Maria Santos from the Communication Center. The Galactic Cooperation Charter has been ratified by 98.7% of participating species. We did it, Rachel. We actually did it. General Patricia Hayes looked up from security reports with relief evident on her face. No major conflicts for 63 days running. No species has attempted to establish authoritarian control. Even the Rigel warlords voted for peaceful expansion protocols. Dr. Thomas Reed was monitoring the quantum sensors that had been tracking architect activity throughout the test period. Energy signatures from the galactic core are changing. I think they're about to render their verdict. As if summoned by his words, every communication system in the hall activated simultaneously. The voice of the architect collective prime intelligence filled the space, but this time there was something different in its tone, something that might have been satisfaction. Test scenario evaluation complete. Duration: 364 standard days. Client species performance assessment: exceptional. Peaceful conflict resolution protocols: successfully implemented. Technological advancement protocols: successfully maintained. Authoritarian prevention protocols: successfully established. Foster felt the collective held breath of nearly 1,000 species as they waited for the final judgment. The fate of galactic civilization hung in the balance. Galactic Civilization Development Project Phase 2, Implementation Decision, Option 3 selected. Client Species Autonomous Development with Architect Oversight approved. Immediate Direct Intervention Protocols discontinued. Emergency Intervention Protocols maintained for crisis scenarios only. The hall erupted in celebration as hundreds of species realized they had achieved something unprecedented in the 15,000-year history of galactic civilization. True self-governance under the protection of the galaxy's most advanced intelligence. But the architect wasn't finished. Additional assessment. Species designation human demonstrates exceptional ability to facilitate interspecies cooperation and peaceful conflict resolution. Recommendation: formal recognition as primary diplomatic coordinators for galactic civilization. Foster felt overwhelming responsibility settle on her shoulders. We're honored by your confidence, but we're still a young species. Are you certain we're ready for such responsibility? Age irrelevant. Capability demonstrated. Human species' unique characteristics. rapid adaptation, innovative problem-solving, exceptional empathy across species barriers, strong resistance to authoritarian tendencies. These traits optimal for galactic diplomatic coordination. Reed couldn't resist asking the question that had puzzled him for months. Why did you really withdraw from active management? Was it just to allow natural evolution? Architect Collective reached philosophical consensus 14,000 years ago. Imposed order creates stagnation. True civilization must develop organically, or it remains dependent on external control. Previous galactic management models all resulted in eventual collapse due to lack of autonomous adaptability. Hayes had a more practical concern. What about the Council? They're still alive in that dimensional exile. Will they try to return? Former secondary management contained in quantum isolation matrix. Escape impossible. However, isolation matrix allows observation of current galactic state. Former secondary management aware of their replacement by successful autonomous civilization. Psychological assessment indicates permanent demoralization. Foster almost felt sorry for the Council members, trapped forever in their dimensional prison, forced to watch the galaxy thrive under the very system they had tried to suppress. Almost. Final notification, the architect continued. Galactic infrastructure maintenance and expansion will continue under architect supervision. New hyperspace routes, communication networks, and defensive systems will be implemented as galactic civilization expands. Emergency protocols remain active for external threats or internal collapse scenarios. External threats? Santos asked. Are there other galaxies with hostile civilizations? Affirmative. Andromeda Galaxy contains aggressive machine intelligence that consumed its organic creators 2 million years ago. Projected arrival in this galaxy, approximately 4 million years. Current galactic civilization development rates suggest readiness for defense will be achieved within 2 million years. Threat assessment. Manageable. The casual mention of a galaxy-consuming threat that would arrive in 4 million years reminded everyone exactly who they were dealing with. The architects operated on timescales that made entire civilizations seem like brief moments. This concludes formal assessment period, the architect announced. Galactic Civilization Autonomous Development Phase begins now. Next scheduled evaluation, 1,000 years. Congratulations on achieving unprecedented successful transition to self-governance. As the communication ended, Foster looked around at the representatives of nearly 1,000 species, all of them free to determine their own futures for the first time in 15 millennia. The silence stretched for a moment before Representative Kolvar of the Antares Union spoke. I move that we formally accept humanity's role as primary diplomatic coordinators and establish the permanent Galactic Cooperation Council with Earth as the primary meeting location. The motion was seconded by dozens of species simultaneously, and the vote was unanimous. Foster found herself thinking about the journey that had brought them here. Just over a year ago, humanity had been a barely noticed species on the galactic periphery, accused of genocide and facing extinction. Now they were the diplomatic heart of the largest free civilization in galactic history. You know, Reed said quietly as the celebration continued around them. The council was right about one thing. Humanity did destroy the old galactic order. We just did it with truth instead of weapons. Hayes nodded, and we replaced tyranny with something better. Democracy, cooperation, freedom, but with guidance from beings wise enough to let us make our own choices. Foster watched as species that had been enemies for millennia worked together to plan joint exploration missions and cultural exchange programs. The galaxy still faced challenges, it always would. But now those challenges would be met by free peoples working together, rather than subjects following orders. As the day progressed, and the new Galactic Cooperation Council held its first session, Foster realized that the greatest irony of all was that the Council's accusation had been partially correct. Humanity had committed genocide against tyranny itself. The galaxy had declared war on humanity and lost everything they thought they knew about governance and freedom. But in losing that war, they had gained something infinitely more valuable: the chance to build a civilization based on cooperation rather than control, growth rather than stagnation, and hope rather than fear. The old council had vanished from the stars, but in their place, something unprecedented had emerged. A galaxy united not by force but by choice. And at the center of it all, The species that had once been marked for extinction now served as guardians of galactic freedom. The war was over, democracy had won, and the real adventure of building a free galactic civilization was just beginning. As Foster prepared for humanity's first official act as primary diplomatic coordinators, mediating a trade dispute between the Silicon Collective and the Methane breathers of Titan 7, she smiled at the thought that somewhere in their dimensional prison, the former council members were watching the galaxy thrive under everything they had tried to prevent. The galaxy had declared war on humanity and vanished from the stars. But the stars had gained something far more valuable in return: freedom, hope, and proof that even the mightiest tyranny could be overcome by courage, truth, and the determination to build something better. The future was unwritten, and for the first time in 15,000 years, it belonged to everyone.